Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Growth and Exit Strategies for Agency Owners. My name is Caan CBE and I'll be your host for this session. Before we start, I'd just like to cover some basic housekeeping. All attendees have been muted upon arrival and I want to make you aware we also plan to record this session. I am delighted to welcome today's guests. We have James Caan, founder and chairman of Recruitment Entrepreneur, and our very own Martin Herbst, CEO here at JobAdder. Martin will chat to James about growing and eventually exiting your recruitment business. But before I hand over to Martin, let me give you a little more information about our guests. James has been in recruitment for over 30 years and invests in recruitment companies of all sizes across various geographies and sectors and plays a pivotal role in shaping each business within the portfolio. James founded the RE Group in 2014, so whether you're looking to start up, scale up, or run a lifestyle recruitment business, Recruitment Entrepreneur can offer a unique funding and mentoring solution. Oh, you okay?
I am indeed.
Martin's been with JobAdder for nearly 2 years now and brings over 20 years experience in launching, scaling from businesses from startup mode to highly profitable enterprises across the globe. So welcome, Martin. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over and let yourself and James just have a chat. Bear with me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Suze. Thanks for sort of organizing this and for setting this up. I'm just going to start off and say I'm absolutely thrilled to be here at the moment with James and have this chat. Like how you put it, Suze. So, you know, there's so many questions I have to kick this off, James, and I think Suze did a great job of just helping frame up the session we have here today for everyone that's attending the webinar. Where I'd like, and I'm probably going to go a little bit in the past, and come back, you know, to the present and maybe talk a little bit about the future. But let's start actually in the present right now because I think, you know, I don't have 30 years recruitment experience myself. I have much more recent recruitment experience, more on the technology side. I've had the luck or the sort of the serendipitous, you know, fact of being able to join JobAdder within the last couple of years in a very interesting time in recruitment. And so I think it would be a great place to start is to just get your take on how do you view the state of the market right now? We've shared a bunch of data at JobAdder in terms of like, you know, the tremendous highs that we're experiencing. But I would love your view in the grand scheme of things, like, you know, based on your experience, you know, through many cycles, but more, you know, what you're seeing right now in the market and any observations you can share.
Great question, Martin. So I think what I'm experiencing, and it's interesting for me, I think it's quite a phenomenon that what I'm seeing isn't just based out of the UK or the US or Canada, etc. We have operations all over the world. And the consistent message, Martin, I'm hearing is the market is absolutely on fire. We are seeing job flow at record levels that I've never seen before. We've got demand from employers like I've never seen before. Some of my portfolio businesses are recording their best ever years that they have since they started. So I think in the recruitment world, I don't think I've seen it any better, Martin. So what a great time to be having this conversation.
Yeah, it is. It's an amazing time to have a conversation. And before we go back, take a little bit look at the past, because we're here to talk, of course, about, you know, growing your own agency, you know, exiting, you know, your agency, and how to even maybe even how to get started. One of my favorite podcasts refers to what's called a Wayback Machine. And so I'm going to go. Let's go back in this Wayback Machine back to 1987 or you know, thereabouts. So I think that, you know, based on, you know, your physical appearance, we're probably about the same age, but, you know, I just can't, it's hard for me to fathom that back in 1987 when I was I guess I was about what we call in the States a freshman. We were freshmen in high school. So it's just entering high school, so year 9. And you were launching, I guess at the time it was Alexander Mann. So what I'd love to start off with, because I think it would be an inspiration for a lot of people who are joining this webinar, is what were you thinking? What were you thinking back then? What was your, your entry into, if that was your entry, maybe it was before then, but what was your entry into recruitment, and how did you make that decision, or how you led to that decision to start your own recruitment business?
So when my journey began in recruitment, Martin, in my entire career, I've always lived by the principle of observe the masses and do the opposite. And at the time when I joined the recruitment industry, I worked for 2 or 3 different firms. But if you go back as far as 1987, recruitment wasn't really a sales-led business. It was predominantly kind of more order taking. So the element of sales was quite limited, because typically what we would do is we'd pick up jobs, we'd advertise them in the newspaper, we'd generate candidates, and we'd make placements. But at that time, the cost of advertising jobs in national newspapers was very expensive. And I was a little bit confused as to why was search only operating at the top level. So what you had is effectively, I think, like 3 types of firms. You had, in those days, the executive search firms, the top tier firms that did pure search, retained. You had the mid-range, what I call the contingency market, and then you had the high street. In those days, kind of Adecco, Brook Street, and brands like that. And all of these, in terms of what differentiated them, was how they access candidates. So of course, search people went direct to candidates, contingent advertised jobs in newspapers, and the high street model is where you attract candidates off the high street. And I worked for a contingent agency, and I used to constantly say to my manager, I've run an ad, it didn't work, I haven't got the candidate, why can't I just headhunt? And he'd be like, don't be ridiculous, we don't do that. So eventually I got a bit frustrated and thought, you know what, I think I should set up my own firm where I can access candidates, the right candidate at the right time. But back in the mid-80s, the concept of what we call today contingency search didn't exist. So nobody did that before. So effectively, I pioneered that concept, literally 30 years ago, where you could take a job in a contingent environment and actually provide a kind of a search strategy. And that was the thing that kind of led me or drove me and excited me, because I felt the market was a bit disjointed. And also, I think when I was looking to start, I knew I didn't have the kind of money that you need, because in those days, advertising in the national press was incredibly expensive. An advert the size of a cigarette packet could cost you, in today's terms, nearly $10,000. So one of the barriers to entry was how you're going to fund candidate generation. So that was my kind of intro into the business.
Yeah, and I love what you said there in terms of, observe the masses and do the opposite, and that recruitment, back in the 80s was much more limited in terms of how it was actually set up, and actually how recruiters thought about going out to find candidates. And it's kind of pioneering at the time, right? To be in the contingent side and to be able to reach out actually to candidates and not just wait till you're more of a headhunter or sort of a search firm. So, I'm curious as well, in terms of you saw something that a lot of people didn't at the time. And it's interesting, 30 years on, a lot has changed, but perhaps not much has changed at all. We still have an overall industry market in which there are a lot of recruiters out there that are order takers, right? They are just going in and they're posting a job on the job boards, and they're waiting for the candidates to come to them. What have you seen? And this is, in the experience, whether it be in Alexander Mann or Humana, but even particularly now with Recruitment Entrepreneur, we can describe a little bit about how that's set up. On the things that we're seeing that have changed in the last few years that you're excited about, and maybe even some of the things that aren't changing fast enough that you're frustrated with.
I think what I think the industry has changed. I think you put it very well, Martin. In one breath, it's changed a huge amount, but actually the principles are exactly the same. So you could almost argue it hasn't changed at all, because we still need a requirement, we still need a job vacancy, we still need to have a candidate, and we still need to go through the interview process to make a placement. Fundamentals are pretty much the same. But I think our strategy on how we do that has literally been transformed. So, I remember when I first set up Alexander Mann, I remember it clearly in my head. I sat on a desk and my desk had two boxes, a green one and a yellow one. And the green one was candidates and the yellow one was clients. Now, if you imagine today, we have these sophisticated CRM systems and technology and graphics and metrics. But at the time, that was my world. It was two plastic boxes. So when I'm calling candidates, I have these cards with my candidate details on. And when I'm calling clients, I've got my little cards. And that was my world. And then you can imagine we then went from that. And literally, this is true. When I was arranging an interview for a candidate at that time, a lot of recruitment agencies used to use messengers. So we would call like a bike messenger. He would come in, we'd put the CV in an envelope and we'd bike it to the client to get the CV there very quickly. And then the world got transformed because somebody invented something called the fax machine. And for us, it was the holy grail. We thought, oh my God, I've just spoken to the candidate and I've called the client. He said he wants to see my candidate and I can literally send that CV through fax machine. It was revolutionary. We thought, wow, life has completely changed. And at the time in central London, there were thousands of firms employing these messengers, and that's really what they did. But of course, the invention of the fax machine meant most of those messengers, were out of work. And then, of course, it developed and you had people using CRM systems. And now you could record, your candidates and you could search a candidate, whereas I used to use my fingers and I'd flick through the boxes to find the candidate and then I'd put them into these dividers. And now that became technology. Then all of a sudden you had this concept of job boards. So rather than using a newspaper, you could actually post the job online. And I was like, oh my God, that's the end of our industry, because a client now can use a job board just like I can. And literally, I thought the business would collapse, but actually it didn't really make any difference. Then all of a sudden you found, I suppose that for me, the biggest transformation in our industry was when LinkedIn came in. Because I remember going to a conference and there were kind of 4 or 5 of us in that kind of coffee area after the conference. And literally we were sitting there, Martin, thinking the world had ended, because the way LinkedIn had positioned itself, we thought, why does anybody need us? Who's going to use us if there's going to be this huge universe of candidates? And at the time, I had spent literally millions and millions of pounds over the years pumping into advertising. And my USP as Alexander Mann was, we have one of the largest databases of specialized candidates in the country. So when we go to a client, that's our big pitch. What LinkedIn is saying is, whatever you have, we're going to have 100 times what you have. And you can buy that at a fraction of the price. So all of a sudden, what happened to my USP? Now my clients have got the same database that I have. So literally, I was literally losing sleep at night thinking that was the end of it. Did it make any difference? No. It just made us more efficient. It made us slicker. So all of the changes that we have experienced, Martin, actually in reality have made us better at what we do. It's made us more efficient. I think today what stands out for me is the edge that you need to have is to become a true market expert. So what is different today than what was then? If I'm honest, I think we were more generalist in those days, but I think today, if you're going to succeed and if you're going to win, you really have to be a true market expert. You need to understand your sector impeccably well. You need to understand your candidate base within that sector really well. And the number of people, Martin, I meet today, who are billing literally over $1 million a year in this really, really niche tight market, where they are incredibly specialized, so I have a business today, which is a business that specializes in intellectual property lawyers. So if you look at a law firm, that's a really narrow area within that law firm. It's a tiny part of what they do. This business that I've invested in, Adamson and Partners, they've got 5 consultants who all bill in excess of $1 million a year in that one niche market. They're not doing conveyancing, they're not doing litigation, they're not doing property lawyers, they're doing one aspect of it. So what I've realized is, to be successful today as a recruiter, you need to be a true expert in your market.
Yeah, there was so much in there, and I want to just share some of that back, because I was just really enjoying where we started off in terms of the fundamentals of recruitment haven't changed, right? They are still, to some sense, the fundamentals. You have a job to fill, you've got candidates. Now you've got sort of this emergence and this progression of new technologies to help you just essentially go through all those different stages. I love what you said in terms of the green box and the yellow box. The green box was it candidates, for the clients. The simplicity of that, right? The simplicity at the end of the day of trying to organize, which is a fairly straightforward process, but it can be, easily overcomplicated. And with technology, can be easily overcomplicated as well. So that's why technology needs to be super simple. And what you said in terms of, okay, well, now you've gone from messengers, right, to actual fax machines. How quickly that actually changed things. And you went from fax machines, of course, then to the next innovation was job boards. And there was a fear that came with that new technology. And then with LinkedIn, another massive fear in terms of, which is sort of, helping with the predictions that the demise of the recruiter. And those predictions about the demise of the recruiter have been happening for years and years and years. And I find that really fascinating, being a relative newcomer to the industry, because if anything, what we have seen is we've only seen growth, right? We've only seen growth in recruiters. And so there's got to be a reason for that. And I have a very curious mind coming from different parts of sort of different tech sectors. I've been in digital media, I've been in e-commerce, I've of course in classifieds, and of course touched on jobs in the categories as part of that. And technology is a lot about automation, manual processing, or manual processes. And e-commerce, if you think about Amazon, it started off with books because it was very easy to categorize. But humans are very complex people, right? Complex beings, very dynamic, very multi-layered. And so my observation is that, if anything, technology is only opening up more opportunity to get recruitment to be better. But humans in the middle of that, as recruiters, will always be required. You need that to very complex matching and overall complex matching people with companies. So anyway, so that's so just an interesting sort of view on this. And let me go back to your last point, though, where you said in terms of starting off and how you actually succeed as a recruiter, as an agency in this market, or in general. And what you said was the need to specialize, right? If you're going to be a generalist, given how fast things are evolving, that's not going to set you up for success. So let's dig a little bit further into that. Is that if someone's out there in the audience today, right, and they either are about to think about actually starting their own business, or they're a year in, maybe 2 years in, and good for them, right? Because if they're a year in, 2 years in, their business is probably going very, very well. And they're probably thinking, hey, I've got this nailed. But we know the tide comes in and the tide goes out. What would be your advice, starting your business and trying to get it from A to B and then to C? Like, what are the things you need to do in addition, or maybe even more detail around specializing? What are the other things that sort of are the hallmarks for success?
I think normally when you start out, Martin, you generally are somebody that's had a background and experience in the sector. So rarely do I see people who are starting in recruitment in their own business who've never done it before. So generally speaking, the people we meet have got 5 to 10 years experience who've been in recruitment have now decided to set up their own brand. So I think you clearly have a position in the market, you have a customer base, and you have a market specialization, which is generally is what has inspired you to set up on your own. So I think when you develop a brand, I remember when I set up Alexander Mann, it was typically in those days, there was Alexander Mann, there was Michael Page, there were Robert Walters, and pretty much we all used to name the businesses around ourselves. But I think today recruitment has become more of a branded business. It's not about personality. It's about positioning your brand in the market. So what I'm a great believer in today, I think in the model world of technology, I think your brand has to do what it says on the tin. So rather than coming up with these highfalutin and very creative names that sometimes don't mean anything, that also implies that when I'm looking for you, I can't find you, because I'm not looking for an obscure brand or name. So the first thing I think you do is you create an identity and a brand that is relevant or appropriate or even easily accessible in your market for somebody looking for you as a specialist. So in the market that you operate in, that market specialism probably should be part of your identity. So I think firstly, brand positioning, and then positioning yourself in that sector with your clients that makes you stand out. What is it that you're going to be offering that client that definitely differentiates you? And I think typically it is market specialization and your depth of knowledge, your expertise, your track record of what you have delivered is what will make you stand out to the candidates and to the clients. So I think it's brand, it's identity, and I think it's that differentiator. So maybe you've placed some very senior people, maybe you've done some webinars, maybe you've done some events in the sector, but all of that collateral is what positions you as a true market expert.
Yeah, where you start in terms of the choose your brand wisely. Just don't slap your own name on it. How are you going to differentiate? How you're going to specialize? And I think it was the British paint brand Ronseal that said something that it is we do what's on the tin. It says what it is on the tin. I've just butchered that actual logo, but
but Martin, even if you look at JobAdder, I mean, to me, it's a great example of it does what it says on the tin. If I was looking for CRM system, the word job coincidentally happens to be in your brand. So it's a great example to me of sometimes people, I think, shy away because they think it looks too simple. They think it looks too basic. So I can see a group of people around a table thinking of the brand JobAdder and thinking, what, it sounds a bit basic, but actually, what, there's nothing wrong with basic. I think one of our problems today is I think we've become, and I think technology is to blame for this, because we have this access to so much information, we have a tendency to over-engineer every situation. We try and overcomplicate and over-engineer it. And actually, when you look back at the things that do so well in life today, if you look at Uber, how easy is it? You latch on, you tap in the address, you click one button and you're in. You go to Google, you type in whatever you want and you have access to data. Everything that I see, what actually defines success today is the opposite to how we're thinking. Success is actually, how do I make this simple and easy? But I think the more intelligent we become, the more we feel the need to overcomplicate and over-engineer.
Yeah, absolutely. I have got a bit of a funny story in terms of my own experience about choosing brand names and overthinking them and overcomplicating it. But to your point about JobAdder, right? It is a very straightforward, it's a very simple name. And what you're talking about, and these are business fundamentals. This is not specific to recruitment, right? This is, I think, essentially sound entrepreneurial, sound business fundamentals. But back in the days when everything was new in the tech space, particularly in .com, you had all these crazy names with different brands coming out, and you had very successful companies, whether it be Yahoo or Google at the time, and still now, of course, who could choose anything. And that's mostly because the technology that they were offering was very groundbreaking, and there was no competition. It was actually, they were creating something new. But if you're going into a market that is contested, how do you actually carve out, essentially, and identify what you do so people can connect to you? So the funny story is this, years ago when I was in strategy, working for eBay, we were launching new businesses for eBay Classifieds. We acquired some businesses as well, including Gumtree in the UK. And then we acquired businesses like Marktplaats, in the Netherlands, and that's an e-commerce site. And the translation from Dutch to English for Marktplaats is simple. It's marketplace. And we found over time that, if you're entering into new markets, particularly ones that were more competitive, when you had a brand that just said what it does and does what it says, you have much more success. Now, the one big failure that we had, except for one market, was the other brand that we chose. We chose a brand called Kijiji. And I'm going to ask you, do you know what Kijiji means?
I have absolutely no idea.
I would be really impressed if you knew. That means that you know Swahili, that you're fluent. So Kijiji actually means village in Swahili. And why the heck would we choose Kijiji for that brand? Well, at the time, right, it was like, hey, we were going to launch this new classified sites in multiple markets across the world. And we wanted to find a brand that could actually work in multiple markets that didn't already have a copyright, et cetera, et cetera. And we, I can't take credit for choosing the name, but we chose the name Kijiji because it had essentially some connotations if you did your research around the idea of local commerce. What we found is actually Kijiji failed everywhere except for Canada. And the reason why it didn't, actually fail in Canada was because there was white space to be had, and because the team there executed really, really well. And they took advantage of that white space. So anyway, I think it really resonates in terms of creating that brand. And the next thing is sort of, I think you said on top of that, be clear about the brand, make sure it's clear in terms of what you represent, what you do, and then really be clear about your specialty and the specific value that you're offering. Now, maybe two questions to this, and you can pick which one to go with. So one is, where have you seen this path start off? And then what are the temptations and where it can be led astray, and where you've seen companies go off this path or do something, and what leads them to that path? So that's probably the first question. Why don't we start there?
So, and I see this a lot, Martin. So today, I'm fortunate. I have a portfolio of nearly 50 businesses in the recruitment space. So I've got a very broad spectrum of knowledge and experience, just what I experience every day. And what I'm finding quite often is people start a recruitment business because they're a good biller. And they start a recruitment business because they're very good with their clients. And they think, oh, I'm going to set up my own business. The challenge that you have is there are two journeys that you need to go on. One is the servicing of your market in terms of your customer base, but the other is a completely different skill set, which is building a business. Now, on the one hand, this is where your real expertise is in customer acquisition, customer development, etc. But when you're building a business, you can almost draw a line in the middle, Martin, because those skills are very uniquely different. So now I've got to build a brand, I've got to build a business, I've got to build an identity, I need to build an organizational structure, I need to build a slick back office, I need to be able to invoice, collect, I need to address HR policies, I need legal, I need financial, I need cash flow management, I need technology, and you can list a whole raft of skills that you need on the right-hand side of the box. When you're then building that business, you then got to go out and attract talent. Now, one of the biggest challenges that you will hear time and time again, Martin, when you speak to owners of recruitment businesses, what is the biggest challenge they face is attracting people to come to work for them. So they just set up a brand new business and they're looking for an experienced individual with 5 or 10 years experience. But to be honest, why does somebody with 5 to 10 years experience need to work for a startup that's been 10 years old or 10 minutes old, that's got no clients, no candidates, etc.? Whereas he can, let's be honest, he has a choice of the market. So how do I attract talent? Once I've attracted that talent, how do I develop, how do I nurture that talent? How do I build a team? How do I build that team while still managing my customer base and while I'm still billing? Because the responsibilities of management when you're small is quite high. Then I need to build a management structure because I can't really grow the business. It can't be the Jimmy Caan show. I need a management team to grow and scale. I need to go out and attract that management team. What do I pay those people? You know, how do I incentivize those people? Why would they want to come and work with me? I then have to manage those people. Now I've hired a management team and I've grown from 5 people to 10 people. My next big challenge is how do I get productivity from each of those 10 people? Because if I'm not careful, I'm going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul because I'm making it on the left hand, but I'm losing it on the right hand because we all know, Martin, not everybody we hire bills. And therefore you've got this productivity challenge. Then I go from 10 people to 20 people, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm driving myself mad because I'm trying to run the business, I'm trying to manage the back office, I'm trying to invoice, I'm trying to collect cash, I've got a finance person I'm trying to manage, you know, how do I manage him? I've now got some HR issues. And that's why I believe around the world, the recruitment industry globally, 75% of our industry, Martin, never gets beyond 7 to 10 people. We get to this kind of boutique size. And if I look at Canada, America, Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Germany, France, every country, and I've operated in 30 countries around the world, the model is the same, Martin. They get so far, and the reason why they don't get beyond that size is because to try and do all of those things when you don't know what you don't know, you've never done it before, you don't have the experience, to be honest, it's very difficult, which is why you end up in this kind of boutique lifestyle environment. And the truth is, you've created no value. What you really have is a nice income. You know, you've got a nice income, you can have a nice lifestyle, but it's not really a business. It is the Jimmy Caan show. There is no intrinsic value because nobody's going to buy that. Because to be honest, what are they buying? You know, if you're going to sell to the trade, an existing recruitment business could hire 5 people very easily without having to pay a multiple of earnings. If you're going to sell to an investor, the investor is got what you call a concentration risk. Generally, boutique businesses, 50 or 60% of the revenue comes from 2 or 3 people. That's too risky. Or in typically boutique businesses, 60, 70% of the revenue comes from 4 or 5 clients. Again, too much concentration. So that's why you will see, very rarely will you see boutique selling. So this vision that the entrepreneur started with, which is, you know, I want to build a business, I want to create a brand, I want to build something of value, 75% of businesses will never achieve that because they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah. I'd love to be able to dive more into that around the building, you know, going from a sole proprietor or the Jimmy Caan show, as you put it, right, into actually real, and then you actually grow that, and like how you learn those things that you don't know, and then ultimately how do you, at one point, sunset yourself out. Before, and let's come back to that, but before we do that, I think it's really important to, hey, you know, you're now launching and expanding recruitment entrepreneur across the globe. And you and I, we had a chat the first time we talked a few months ago. Can't remember precisely when it was. Everything seems to blur these days with the COVID time. I think it was the latter half of last year, around October. We hopped on a call. You shared some of your expansion plans with Recruitment Entrepreneur, and I was just blown away. You know, just absolutely blown away in terms of what you have planned, what you had planned next, and what you guys are doing now. But I wanted to touch on that because I think it's worth actually delving a bit more into that because Recruitment Entrepreneur started off in the UK, has done really well. JobAdder, you know, was partnered with Recruitment Entrepreneur very early on, and we've grown together.
I'd like to say, Martin, the exclusive partner to JobAdder.
Thank you. you'll get your compensation list. Yes, so it's been an amazing partnership, and we've grown quite a lot together. And we talked about this a few months ago, as I said, I was blown away. But what got you to the point where you said, I think, and you kind of already addressed it, but hey, what we're doing here, we can do in so many other markets, and it led you to that next step?
I mean, so I think you would probably know, Martin, probably as well as most people, that the principles of recruitment are exactly the reason why JobAdder can open in the States, can open in Canada, because the business is the same. The process is the same, the tactics are the same, which is why your software is very applicable in pretty much most markets around the world. Because of my experience of building Humana International, where I grew that business to 147 offices in 30 countries around the world, I experienced, Martin, firsthand that recruitment is the same in Brazil as it is in Canada, as it is in Singapore, as it is in Tokyo. What that then means is if the business is the same, the dynamics are the same. So in each of those markets, you have the same people waking up one morning and saying, you know what, I'd like to do this myself. But he's going to face exactly the same challenges as the guy in London, because he's the same guy. So when you then look at the dynamics of the market in Canada, you will see the market is dominated by 79% of the market is boutiques. You look at the US market, it's probably 74% dominated by boutiques. So what we realize is what we had experienced in the UK is being faced by entrepreneurs all over the world with exactly the same challenge. And therefore, Recruitment Entrepreneur as a proposition, as an offering, which basically enables the entrepreneur to have a real partner who brings the expertise that he hasn't got or that he lacks or he's never experienced in. So all of those challenges, when I said there were two lines, you have the line which is clearly really important, which is what is your vision, what's your strategy, what's the market you want to build, how do you want to execute in that? That's where you are very good. But then you've got all these building blocks of business in terms of cash flow management, talent attraction, development, leadership, culture, but also who is going to be your coach? Now, if you look at the analogy of sports, just because you're, Federer or Nadal or Tiger Woods, doesn't matter how good you become, they all have coaches. So when you're going, especially in this journey, when you're about to build a business and you're entering in a zone that you've never been in before, how possible is it really to do it without a coach? So Recruitment Entrepreneur is not just your investor because it invests real capital and real money. It coaches, it mentors, and it develops you in those key skills that you need to build and scale that business. It brings together the tactics, the strategies, the know-how, the platform that enables you to attract the talent, the expertise that you need to manage that talent, the financial resources to help you manage the financials and the cash flows. It's global network to enable you to grow that business into a brand. So all of the things that you need to scale, and scale is really building value, is really the partnership that Recruitment Entrepreneur provides that individual to enable him not to become part of the 75% of lifestyle boutique businesses, but we want our entrepreneurs to sit in the 25% box where they really build significant intrinsic value in their business.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on what you said in the middle there about needing a coach and getting a coach, and love the fact that you brought up I think it was, Federer. No matter how talented you are, no matter how much you work or how hard you work, everyone needs a coach. Everyone needs a mentor and advisor if you really want to succeed and get to the next level. And so as a family, we just watched King Richard, the movie King Richard, the father of Venus and Serena Williams. And I thought a interesting subplot or thread within that film, and the true life story, of course, was how their father was just very dogged in how he tried to find them the best possible coach. And he went straight to the top. He went to all the best, right? And he came up with a business plan, et cetera, to be able to convince someone to take on his girls. And he got to, I think it's the coach of McEnroe and Sampras. Cohen is his last name. I think Peter Paul Cohen. And that Cohen brought on Venus and Serena to hit some balls around. He saw something in them in those few minutes where he decided to take a leap, and he decided to say, yeah, you know what, I'll take you guys on, and you don't have to pay me anything. Now, so the reason why I brought that up, one is because I thought it was a fascinating sort of subplot of the movie, but more importantly, more relevantly, is I would love to hear from you what you look for when you're thinking of new VCs, new entrepreneurs to join Recruitment Entrepreneur. What are so maybe the kind of tennis strokes that you're looking for candidates, right? Because you've obviously done this many times yourself, and in the UK. What are those qualities that really come through that shine above the others?
So I think the first thing, Martin, is we look for that left-hand line where it says, are you a true market expert? Are you somebody credible with a great track record in your market? Can you lead by example? Are you somebody that can demonstrate success in leadership? Are you somebody that is a natural at attracting talent? Do people want to work with you? Because some people, and there's nothing wrong with it, are just brilliant at what they do and they build, but they don't have that charisma of building a team around them. Do you really have an interest in business? What are the kind of attributes that you have from a business perspective? Because again, it's not something that everybody has. So we look for somebody that's got a little bit of that business know-how. We want somebody that has a vision for growth, because sometimes I meet people, and to be honest, they want a lifestyle business. They can't envisage themselves running a business of 20, 40, 50, 100 people. So want somebody that's got the ambition, the drive, and the vision to create and build that. You need somebody that's got that kind of natural leadership quality where they can themselves coach and mentor the people around them. Because people join you because they want to learn and develop. So whenever I talk to anybody around the world who's joining one of our firms and I say, what was it about the opportunity? And the most common response I hear is that I felt I could learn and develop more within Recruitment Entrepreneur than I could do elsewhere. So I think everybody has that hunger, that desire to become better. So when I look at the entrepreneur that I want to back, I'm interested to see, do they have those natural qualities? At the same time, I'm looking for people who don't want to be just a manager. I want them to be an owner. I want them to be a shareholder. And therefore, I need people who have the commitment of their own vision where they are prepared to back themselves and they can invest with us. So every business I back, I want to have a true partner. So when things are going well, we both share in the success. But when things are not performing, we want to be in a position where we both experience the pain. And that's what true entrepreneurship is about.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting how you talked about what the things you're looking for in terms of that ambition, that drive, that vision for growth. Now, you're talking to a lot of people, your team is talking to a lot of people, potential VCs to join Recruitment Entrepreneur. And now we're doing this in many different markets, right? You're doing it in the US, entering into
Canada, Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, Germany, Sweden, Austria. I mean, literally, we are opening. I mean, it's just, Martin, right now, I can't tell. If somebody told me 6 months ago that we'd already be in 10 countries 6 months from launch, I don't think they'd be smoking marijuana. I mean, it's just gone beyond, anything I could have imagined, because the proposition is being so well received around the world. If I showed you the organogram of what the business looked like 6 months ago to today, I mean, you would be blown away.
Yeah, I was going to say that maybe it'd be easier to list the countries that you're not. Go with that list. I would love to see that chart. And so, going back to that interview, that recruitment stage, right? And which is fascinating, right? Because this is what you've been doing for years and years and years, and like to be able to identify those people who've got what it takes, who have got that ambition, that vision, and that sort of the ability to get to the next level. So I imagine a lot of that's through just the actual meetings themselves, but they're little cues or sort of other things that you're seeing in. I mean, it does take resolve, it does take ambition, it does take initiative to be able to break off from a larger agency, for example, and start your own thing, right? But then there's all these other sort of steps and levels you have to get through, and you need the right everything else to go from that biller to that business builder, right? What else are you hoping to see as part of some other signs or cues or whatever that, hey, I'm a bit different than the other thousands of 79% of the market, the boutiques, the 1 to 5 person shops. I'm a bit different. It's not what I'm just telling you, right? But you can see it by if you look at it, such and such.
So typically our journey, Martin, when I meet somebody at Recruitment Entrepreneur, the journey to evaluate a potential individual that we will invest in typically takes between 4 to 6 weeks. And during that period, we will typically meet somebody between 6 to 10 times. And every time we meet that individual, we'll learn a bit more about the person. So all of the characteristics we look for, we want to see some demonstrable track record of actually doing some of those things. Because you're right, saying it doesn't make it happen. So if we're talking about, customer development, I'd like to know in your 10-year career, give me 5 customers that you've demonstrated that you've really knocked the cover off the ball on. Now, if in the last 5 years, every single client you've ever had dealt with, you only place 1 person, that doesn't really define customer strategy or customer development. If we're looking at somebody from a leadership and a growth perspective, but they've never really hired anybody, they've never actually gone out and physically attracted somebody themselves. They've either inherited people, or the company does the hiring, or there's a graduate training scheme, but they've never actually done that. Of course, it would worry me. So during that 4 to 6 week period, we look at and evaluate each of those things. So when people say to me, I'd like to be somebody more business minded, tell me some of the things that you've done. Tell me how, in your current role, do you produce a budget? And if so, how do you produce a budget? So for example, when my entrepreneurs come to me, there's lots of entrepreneurs I meet, and they produce a business plan, Martin, and they say, in year 1, I'm going to hire 5 people. In year 2, I'm going to go to 10 and 15, etc. And we say, great, and what are they going to bill? And coincidentally, they all bill the same. They never have a bad month. There's no seasonality, and there's no churn. And that just tells you they've never really built a business plan before, because not everybody bills, and they don't all bill in the same month. There is the summer period, which takes a bit of a nosedive. Sometimes December has a 3-week month, and there is something called churn, and therefore your business plan will go out of sync just on those factors. Now, when you meet somebody who has got a little bit of experience in that, they will know those factors. Now cash flow is a crucial factor. So a lot of the entrepreneurs that I meet, when I say to them, in your current area, what is the typical debtor days in your market? Do you know 85% of the people don't know the answer to that question? Because that's not what they do. So if you work at Michael Page or Hayes or Walters and some of these big businesses, why would you even know that? But now this is your business. I'll give you an example of a business plan I looked at literally yesterday, Martin. So somebody came to me, they want to set up a legal business. So I said, how long does it typically take you to make a placement in your market? And she said between 3 to 5 months, because in law firms, you literally have to meet most of the partners before you join. So that entire recruitment process is actually quite long and typically can take 3 to 5 months. And then she said, and I said, that's great, I understand that. And I said, what's the typical notice period that lawyers have? And she said, anywhere between 3 to 6 months. So I said, what are the typical payment terms in the legal profession? And she said, to be honest, lawyers don't like paying, and they're very slow payers, so 60 to 90 days. So I said, that's really interesting. Can I just map that out for a second? So I said, you start in January, and you work with a candidate that takes you, let's say, 4 months. Let's take an average. So 4 months to get an offer for that person. And you said that takes between 3 to 6 months of notice period. Okay, so let's take the middle number and say 4 months again. So he's now got to wait 4 months before he starts. And I'm going to assume that you bill the day he starts. So we're now into month 8, and you're saying that they pay within 60 to 90 days. So let's pick 2.5 months. So we're now into month 11, Martin, before you got paid on that person that you interviewed in January. Now, how many recruitment consultants do you think, when they're looking to start their own business, have any idea of the impact of that cash flow? Because I funded that consultant for 11 months before I see any cash. Now, as we both know, in businesses, why do most businesses go bust? Because they run out of cash. And that's a great example of that one simple question is, what is the average debtor days in your market within the customer base that you're operating in? If you don't know the answer to that question, your business basically has a high degree of failure because you will run out of cash. You simply won't have the cash to fund that 11-month cycle. So when we are engaged with those prospects during that period, that's what we're trying to learn and understand. It's not a quick process. We're not in a hurry. We want to back the right individual with the right characteristics. And what we're looking for is, we're not looking for an accountant, but we need somebody that understands the principles, and we can then develop those. What makes recruitment entrepreneurs stand out today, Martin, is all of the areas that we provide leadership, support, and coaching in. If you look at the caliber of people that exist within the international team, and I'm not just saying this because it's recruitment entrepreneur, but these are the smartest people literally in the world. In building, growing, and scaling recruitment businesses, we have people that literally are those world-class coaches in training, in development, in talent attraction, in business skills, on technology, on marketing and branding. So all of the characteristics that you need along that journey, we're not giving you textbooks, we're not giving you PowerPoint presentations. We're giving you people who've been there, done it before, but done it to a world-class level. That's the thing that I think makes recruitment entrepreneur stand out, heads and shoulders. So people say to me, but I can go to the bank and get the capital, James. But the bank does not provide you all of the skills that you need. It doesn't provide you. And sometimes they say, I've got an investor that's prepared to invest in me. Great, but that's not just what you need. So when people ask me at Recruitment Entrepreneur, how much of the capital represents the success in what I'm doing? And the truth of the matter is, it's no more than 15%. The capital alone does not get you to scale and build value. 85% of the value comes from the expertise, the knowledge, the coaching, the mentoring, the development, and enabling you to go through that journey to scale your business.
Yeah, so that's rich in terms of that, just that funding, that 15% to get to the next level. And what I want to get to now, and it just, conscious of time, right? So we're coming up in about an hour, and we talked about in the blurb and the description for this webinar about the growth of the start, the growth, and the exit. So let's talk, 2 more questions maybe around exiting. So for those that agencies, the smaller agencies, that don't partner up with a recruitment entrepreneur, what is typically, if I've got the Jimmy Caan show, right, and I'm growing my own business and trying to get to the next level, what is the most common exit scenario if you're not part of recruitment entrepreneur? Like, what are you seeing out there in the market, and what people are hoping for, but may or may not happen? So that's, I guess, the first question. Then I love to then go, what's my plan, or what's my future as part of recruitment entrepreneur? But let's do both.
So I think if you take the boutique business, Martin, the boutique business, the truth is, has no exit strategy, because the simple question is, who's going to buy it and what are they buying? And it goes back to the points we made earlier. It's not really saleable because it's too dependent on too fewer people. And if 1 or 2 of them leave, it's game, set, and match, using your tennis analogy. And if you lose 1 or 2 customers, your revenue will fall off a cliff. So the truth is, that is not really a saleable business, because an investor certainly wouldn't buy it, And a trade buyer would perceive that he could recruit 5 or 6 people himself. So those businesses don't exit. The other thing to remember is that, and I've been doing this for 30 years now, and probably, Martin, less than 1% of the businesses that are started in recruitment will ever see a realization event. So 99% of the businesses will never get to an exit, because to build a business to an exit, there are so many different attributes the business needs to have. So I would say in that first question, if you're in the lifestyle model, really you have very little hope of achieving genuine capital value in the business. The difference in recruitment entrepreneur is because we have sold, as a business, we have sold more recruitment businesses than anyone else in the world. So our understanding, our knowledge of what the buyer looks for, and most importantly, who is the buyer. So where recruitment entrepreneur is so unique in the way it's positioned is we own our own private equity firm. So we already have that network of global buyers around the world that we are in conversations with every single month. So if you just look at now, Martin, as you may be aware, we just sold a business 3 months ago, Walter James Associates, to a buyer in the US. We currently have another offer on the table from a buyer in Sweden. We're in discussions and we've just signed heads of terms with that buyer. We're in discussions currently with a buyer in China who is very interested in one of our finance and accounting businesses. So we're in this unique position that we've got recruitment entrepreneur, then we happen to own a private equity firm. Our private equity firm has been going for 20 years in the human capital space. So you imagine over 20 years, we've nurtured those relationships with buyers. And because we've sold so many businesses, every business we sell, the buyer hires a PwC, a KPMG, a Deloitte. So we're used to seeing what are the things that they look for, where do they attribute value. So when recruitment entrepreneur is coaching and mentoring you to develop your business, it is helping you to do that, to design the business that is attractive to exit. So there are certain things. So for example, we know without a solid leadership team, you're never going to exit. So coincidentally, every business recruitment entrepreneur invests in, you will see, will have the strategy of putting together a core leadership team where the business is not dependent on the founder. Every business that we have is not dependent on 1 or 2 customers. Every business we have has a real career structure where people can develop and grow so that when a buyer comes along, he's saying, okay, I buy it today. How is this business going to grow in the future? What is the strategy for future growth? So all of those questions that we get asked from buyers is the building blocks that we put in from day one. So the business, so if you look at the last business I sold, that business took 6 years from start to exit. The one that we currently have under offer today took 5 years. If you look at the global market, Martin, and say, what is the typical time frame that a business takes to exit? It is between 17 and 20 years. So recruitment entrepreneur has really revolutionized that time scale, by 70%. Recruitment entrepreneur will exit businesses 70% faster than the market.
That's phenomenal. So 5 to 6 years versus 17 to 20 odd years. And many people, getting into recruitment or starting their own thing probably would never imagine, to be running that for that long. 5 to 6 years, massive difference. Well, listen, speaking of exiting, we're going to have to exit this. And listen, I really always enjoy talking to you, James. It's been always a pleasure. Really enjoyed our partnership together, exclusive partnership, as you mentioned, between JobAdder and Recruitment Entrepreneur. I don't know if Suze is supposed to get back on and close this off. I think it's me. So we're just going to presume it's me. But I want to thank everyone for joining, and also Suze for organizing. And have a great rest of your day. And I think that we're done.
Fantastic. It was lovely chatting to you, Martin. I really enjoyed it. And as always, I think the hour just flew by, because when you catch me on a subject that I'm so passionate about, you can't stop me talking.
I know. We'll have to have a round 2 of these. Okay.
Good to talk to you. Take care, guys. Thanks for joining the webinar.
Okay, thank you. Bye.